As a member of the YWCA of Delhi, she has helped design course materials on laws relating to women's rights for outreach programs conducted by the YWCA. Ma'am is a member of the board of directors of the Belgium-Luxembourg Business Association, in which capacity she works with the embassies of Belgium and Luxembourg to assist West European companies in entering the Indian market and vice versa. With such an elaborate profile, it is an honor for us to have you judging this debate. Thank you, ma'am, for consenting for the same.
Thank you, Dr. Bhasin.
I now invite Ms. Renita Kapoor, our second judge. Ma'am is an award-winning actor, a highly rated motivational wellness speaker, personality development and transformation coach, and a group facilitator. With over 25 years of international working experience in the United States and Singapore, she decided to settle in India and is working with individuals, groups, and organizations to amplify their authenticity and empower them to become a better version of themselves. Having worked in both theatre and films, she uses unique interactive techniques in her workshops and sessions, which enhances her clients' learning experience. Ms. Kapoor has conducted multiple webinars as a speaker and a trainer, along with physical workshops and trainings for corporates, individuals, and schools. She is also the founder and director of RMS Productions Private Limited and is an award-winning actress. If she looks faintly familiar to you, you probably have seen her in The City of Dreams, seasons 2 and 3, a web series on Disney Hotstar, Crimes and Confessions, a web series on Balaji, or probably Three Sisters and a Dream, which was a feature film released in the year 2020. And of course, these are just to name a few. Ms. Kapoor has devised creative ways using theatre techniques in her workshops for teens and adults to discover their inner strengths, transform and develop their personalities, therefore becoming confident in dealing with public. Thank you very much, ma'am. It is a pleasure and honor to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for me too. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final judge, Mrs. Namrata Datta Bera. Mrs. Datta Bera has a master's in English literature and has been a teacher since the year 2002. She has taught in some of the leading schools in Lucknow as well as Mumbai. At present, she is working as a supervisor of the senior secondary section and a senior faculty of English in the Hiranandani Foundation School, Powai, in Mumbai. An innovative educator, ma'am is passionate about creating engaging, experiential, and ethical learning spaces for young learners. She has headed the student exchange program between Hiranandani Foundation School and the Sondovik School in the Netherlands for the last 6 years. She started a mental well-being project, Mindscape, in the year 2015 for the students of her school, which has now become an inter-school event. She has been conducting training programs for teachers teaching English literature at the ISC level in Mumbai. An avid reader and an occasional writer, Ms. Namrata Datta Bera is now spearheading a virtual writing program in English based on the cultural roots of India for global students. We welcome you, ma'am. Thank you for consenting to judge today's debate.
Absolute honor. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, those are our judges, but it is also important for me to introduce somebody who is absolutely vital for today's debate. As you know, timekeeping is an integral part for each competition. Ensuring that all speakers get their fair share of time to put across their views, our timekeepers for today are Hunfa Khan, the debate prefect, and Zoya Usmani. I welcome the two of you and wish you good luck for the tough job that you have at hand today. As Mrs. Rodrigues has told us the topic for the composite round, let me now introduce you to the topic for the final round of the debate today. I will repeat it twice, though I'm sure you all have it in front of you. This House believes that the focus of our development plans should be human interests rather than multi-species justice. Participants and judges, please note the topic one more time. This House believes that the focus of our development plans should be human interests rather than multi-species justice. The rules of the debate have already been announced by Mrs. Rodrigues. Thank you, ma'am, for acquainting everyone with the rules of this debate. I will only acquaint you with the format of this debate by reading out a few important rules which specifically concern the speakers and the judges. Each of the two teams involved in this round will use 3 speakers. That is, each side, the proposition and the opposition, will comprise of 3 speakers. Each side will have 1 principal speaker, a second speaker, and a third speaker. The 2 teams constituting the proposition and the opposition will decide amongst themselves the roles of the respective speakers. The 2 principal speakers will get 5 minutes to speak. During this period of time, they will put forth their respective team's line of argument. The second and the third speakers will be given 4 minutes each to take that argument forward. In each case, a warning bell will be rung 1 minute before the end of the speaking time, followed by the final bell. Speakers will be penalized for speaking beyond the bell. After completing their speech, the concerned speaker will be given 2 minutes to answer the question raised by the opposing team. Participants, please note that these questions have to be short, precise, and based on the speech that has just been delivered. Please do not question a speaker based on what another member of their team may have said earlier. Your questions need to be directed categorically on the speaker's speech. Please note that no cross-questioning will be allowed. Thereafter, the 2 principal speakers will be given 4 minutes each to sum up their team's argument and to counter those given by the other team. The 2 summing up speeches will not be subject to refutation. A warning bell for that will be rung after 3 minutes, followed by the final bell at 4 minutes. As you can see, we have 2 sides, the proposition and the opposition, each of which is represented, as I told you, by 3 participants. I will introduce them first and then declare the debate open. Side proposition is represented by St. Agnes Loreto Day School, Lucknow. I welcome the principal speaker, Anisha Singh, the second speaker, Mahim Fatima, and the third speaker, Japneet Kaur. Side opposition is represented by La Martiniere for Girls, Kolkata. The principal speaker, Akansha Panda, the second speaker, Priyansha Ray, and the third speaker, Urvi Banerjee. You all have fascinating names, and I'm sure we are all looking forward to equally fascinating speeches from all 6 of you. And I will now throw the debate open. I request Anisha Singh, the principal speaker of side proposition, to come and express her views for the motion.
Greetings, members of the House. The topic proposed by the House today states that this House believes that the focus of our development plans should be of human interest rather than multi-species justice, and our team stands firmly with it. Now, to give focus to what follows, let me start by giving you some basic definitions which will be elaborated as well as expanded in the discussion that follows. First off, we have human need. Now, human need, or more accurately, the object of human need is something which a human being must have in order to live a recognizably human life. Next up, we have human interest. An interest, or more accurately, the object of human interest is a thing that is either a direct object of human need or else it is related to a direct object of human need, as reliable means is to an end. Thus, if supposedly health is something that one needs, medicine is something which is of human interest. Now, human beings possess many natural advantages over other organisms that allows them to have a dominating influence over nature. Humans are more significant than other creatures in nature because humans have certain morphological characteristics, such as bipedal locomotion and erect posture, which allows them to have free forelimbs, and opposable thumb allows them to move it in any manner possible. Now, humans are also ecologically dominant as they can compete better owing to their own anatomy, morphological characteristics, and a large brain size, and thus exert greater influence on the habitat. Human beings are one of the most important agents of evolution as they have altered the course of evolution and have increased the speed of evolution by domesticating animals or by making man-made habitats. Now, before I start, I am simply going to concentrate on the importance of humans compared to other species. Now, when discussing importance, it is essential to define the context. I know that in this context, the universe, pretty much every life is worthless. We are all organisms on a little planet that orbits a standard star set in one of the many billions of galaxies. Now, one day our sun will expand and that will be the end of all of us. But of course, you can't judge worth in that context. And so I come to my first point, imagination. Humans have the power of imagination. And as far as I'm aware, and we all are aware that other creatures do not. The power to visualize things that we do not directly experience or see is what caused humans to flourish in the first place. It is an incredible ability in the animal kingdom. And it leads me to my second point, which is cognition. We as humans, as well as possessing imagination, are also self-aware of our surroundings. We have the ability to question our own existence, and we have concepts such as ethics and compassion. These concepts are too convoluted and intricate to be possessed by other creatures. Now, the sole reason why humans believe that their needs are superior to others is because we have the ability to think of complex things like superiority. These complex thoughts are too difficult to be conjured by other organisms. We consider ourselves superior to other species because we are capable of the abstract thought that enables us to consider ourselves superior to other species. Now, since our origin, wildlife has had a very important role in human life. The very diverse and continuous human-wildlife interactions can be seen in two main perspectives. First, utilitarian, in which wildlife species provide goods for humans, such as food, clothing, transport, etc. So, second up, we have affective, where human beings feel sympathy, admiration, and respect for animals because of religious, mystical, or philosophical reasons. Now, what we intend to say here is that human interests are reliant on multi-species. The concept goes hand in hand. Our aim here, ladies and gentlemen, is to remind you that human interests are not against multi-species interest. Rather, it aligns with it, forming a congenial atmosphere for both to exist together. And that is exactly what the second speaker will be covering in her speech. We also aim to shed light on the fact that the idea of multi-species interest is one that is more utopian than practical. With over 8.7 million species on Earth, you must realize that it is a Herculean task to ensure the conservation, preservation, and protection of each species. We must understand that human interests are more immediate and tangible for us. And thus, that is exactly what the third speaker of side proposition will be covering in her speech. That is how I would like to rest my case. Thank you so much. And now we'll be moving on to the second speaker of side proposition.
Thank you, Anisha, for those thought-provoking comments and for putting forth your and your team's views in front of us. Let's see how this will proceed with the following speakers. But before I invite the next speaker, side opposition may now address their questions to the speaker. Please remember, there are only 2 minutes allotted for this, and you are permitted a maximum of 2 questions. Side opposition, I invite you to question the principal speaker of the proposition. If there is any...
Yes. You had mentioned that human beings have certain dominating features, but how can you use this line of reasoning to neglect the interest of other species and focus on human interests when we clearly live in a multi-special ecosystem?
All right, ma'am, thank you so much for asking that question. Now, what I intend to say here is that from a practical point of view, you must realize that humans depend on other species. And by conserving our own species, we are conserving other species. Now, let's take, for example, the bluefish tuna. These are rare species on which we depend, and these act as provisions for food. By protecting them, we are also protecting our own species. So it is our dominating characteristics which allows us to protect them. It is not possible for the other species to exist if we do not, because if we do not think about their conservation, if we do not think about us, we do not think about their conservation. And if we do not think about their conservation, then who will be there to think about their conservation, protection, as well as preservation? I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Team opposition, do you have any more questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Please proceed.
Thank you for your speech, ma'am. Mitigation of war falls under human interest, which is not beneficial in any way. So how would you want to justify your stance on that?
All right, ma'am. Thank you so much for asking that question. Now, we must realize that the sole purpose of the topic, the verbatim of the topic that is given, is that we should put human interest first and then put multi-species interests. That does not mean that we are putting human interests only. The thing is that multi-species interest should also be taken into consideration, but only if human interest is put first. Because in isolation, humans cannot exist. And that is something that is very well granted and accepted by humans. So survival in isolation is not possible. There is a chain. And our existence runs parallel to that of the existence of other species. So by conserving our existence, we are hand in hand also conserving the existence of other species. Thank you.
Thank you, Anisha. Those are the two questions, and those are, I think, also the 2 minutes. I now request the principal speaker, side opposition, Akansha Panda, to come forward to express her views against the motion.
If you really think that the environment is less important than the economy, try holding your breath while you count your money. On that note, a very good afternoon, members of the House, members of the jury, and my most worthy but unfortunately misguided opponents. The motion under fire for today reads that the focus of our development plans should be human interests rather than multi-species justice. And as principal speaker of side opposition, I will be showing the multifaceted aspects of this motion and drawing a thread of logic, while my second speaker will be elaborating on these aspects and providing you with a lot of evidence and statistics, while my third speaker will be constructively deconstructing the arguments put forward by side opposition, keeping the thread still intact and proving to you why this motion stands invalid. I will be beginning by defining a few vital key terms that will be constantly used in this debate, since side proposition has successfully diverted from today's motion. Members, since the concept of human needs and human interests was brought up by the principal speaker, let me give you the correct definition of both. Human needs are something that is essential for human survival, while human interests are their desires to progress single-handedly, and it has nothing to do with their survival. Something that is dangerous when given a lot of preference with regards to our environment and other species. Secondly, members, focus. Members of the House, the moment we use the word focus in the motion, it directly implies that we as humans should be giving more importance to our own interests while giving little or no importance to multi-species justice, something which side proposition has disregarded in their definitions. Third, multi-species justice. It is the theory of justice that includes not only the interests of all humans, but of non-humans such as other animals, plants, forests, river, and ecological systems. This very term brings me to our first constructive. Members of the House, we call ourselves humans. Humans are itself species of the earth and are very much part of this world's nature, and the very word multi-species involves humans as well. What side opposition is trying to prove to the House today is not the fact that we should sideline human interests, but seek a balance between humans, plants, and animals. That is the very meaning of the word multi-species justice. Members of the House, today's debate is not about saying humans and trees are the same. It is about humans to reposition themselves not as over and above the earth, but as embedded in relationships that nourish and sustain every living thing on this planet. Understand how human interests are itself a part of multi-species justice. Thus, we are advocating for both when we focus on multi-species justice. Today, if we take side propositions logic, we can compare it to a gardener who waters just a part of the garden, leaving the rest dry. Members of the House, we all know in the end, the rest of the garden is dry and rotten. The bees and other insects that used to come to the garden for pollination will also stop coming. The ground turns barren. And after a while, even the part of the garden that was healthy at one point dries out. That is exactly what happens the moment we seek to focus our interest on just one of the million species that inhabit this earth. Coming to my second constructive, members, it is imperative to understand that without multi-species justice, there would be no human interests in the first place, nor would humans be able to even implement their interests, proving the very fact that everything roots from the well-being of every living thing existing on this planet. It itself involves the protection of species that are also essential to human life. Today, if human interests are reducing poverty, increasing employment, etc., how would all of that happen or even is happening without a healthy environment? Coming to my last constructive, I urge the House to think about this. We have already prioritized human interests because of the amount of innovation and development we have seen throughout, and we might already be at the peak of humanity. But members, today's human interests are reducing poverty, increasing the standard of living of people, promoting sustainable development, each of which is directly related to multi-species justice. There is a reason why every 5-year-old in school is taught about the environment, nature, and the world around them. It is because of the sheer fact that we should seek a balance today. We are not alone in this world, and even humans need the presence of different species for their survival. To conclude, I would like to leave the House with a couple of questions. Members, where would humans be if forests did not exist? Where would humans be if people did not exist? Where would humans be if the air they breathed was filled with the very same dust they polluted the air with by building of industries? With that, I would like to conclude. Thank you. Ma'am,
Dr. Bhasin, I think your microphone is off.
Sorry, my apologies. Thank you, Akansha, for that very emphatic and heartfelt delivery. Timekeepers, may I know how many seconds the speaker exceeded by?
Madam Chairperson, the speaker spoke for 5 minutes and 15 seconds.
15 seconds. Judges, please note the principal speaker, side opposition, Akansha Panda, exceeded the time limit by 15 seconds. Side proposition, you are now invited to ask questions. Please remember, 2 questions limited to 2 minutes only.
Thank you, ma'am. May I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Congratulations on your speech, ma'am. My question to you is that even if the entire cognition of human interest is removed from the perspective, who do you propose would actually go into helping the multifaceted species justice?
Thank you for your question, ma'am. As I mentioned in my speech, multi-species justice does not mean negating human interests or sidelining them. What we are trying to propagate and what the term itself speaks about is the balance of both and the coexistence of both, and not only promoting human interests. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Side proposition, do you have any more questions for the speaker?
Ma'am, may I go forward with my question?
Yes, please.
All right, ma'am. You stated at the last part of your speech that where would humans be if forests did not exist? Now, my question to you is that multi-species, the term itself is very subjective. Each individual has a different definition of which species will be included in that and which won't. So do you consider that if locusts prove a harm to individuals, then should they be protected because they come under different species? So how do you suppose that that will not be contradictory to your own statement?
Thank you for your question, ma'am. As the term itself speaks about, it speaks about the justice and the development and the well-being of species that exist on this planet. Mostly, if we generalize it, be it animals, plants, or even the different water bodies and the ecological system we live in. Ma'am, you must understand that when I'm trying to propagate about multi-species justice, it seeks, and with comparison to human interests, we are trying to talk about a coexistence of the both. We are not trying to say that cockroaches should not be killed or locusts should not be killed, since they are obviously pests, but we are talking about a general way where each and every living being that helps in the environment should exist along with humans. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Akansha. With that, we have both the principal speakers having introduced their sides to the judges and to us. I now invite the second speaker of side proposition, Mahim Fatima, to now come up and present her views for the motion.
Thank you for the recognition. Greetings to one and all. Human interest. These are two words which are the umbrella term for the overall development of the earth. These words are being misinterpreted and misused by the side opposition. Just like the term feminism, just because it has the term feminine in it, is misinterpreted as female chauvinism, when in fact it is the advocacy of women's rights on the basis of equality of all genders. See how similar sounding words are being misused and misinterpreted? The subject of multi-species justice is often portrayed as it being odds with human interests, when in fact it is intricately woven into the very fabric of what it means to safeguard the well-being of humanity and in turn the well-being of ecosystem in general. While some may argue that human interests take the precedence or the superstance over the interests of other species, I firmly believe that the pursuit of human interest inherently includes the imperative of upholding the multi-species justice. Now, allow me to elaborate this with compelling examples. Firstly, various conservation initiatives have successfully revived and protected endangered species, thanks to the concerted efforts of governments, organizations, communities, all of whom happen to be humans. Another instance would be the conservation of the efforts that were made towards the saving of southern wild rhinoceros. These have yielded exceptional results, with the population increasing from 50 individuals in the late 19th century to over 18,000 in the recent years, as the report suggests by the International Rhino Foundation. Now, here I would also like to mention the very fact that we have considered it as our prerogative to set up these sustainable development goals. No other species has such a high degree of understanding, intellect, emotion, and the greatest of all, problem-solving ability. A data compiled by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the FAO, has recently revealed that the unregulated proliferation of certain animal populations, particularly in the agricultural settings, has resulted in significant economic losses amounting to over $120 billion. This too annually. This is to say that if humans weren't there to inspect or look into and provide assistance to these species, many such species would actually have killed other species, resulting in a calamity in general. This is because of their innate need to satiate their own hunger and their own survival instinct. Ladies and gentlemen, human interest should not be made the demon. So to put, it is in fact the knight in shining armor for all the species. In conclusion, I would like to state that the argument that multi-species justice supersedes human interest has absolutely no basis, because the opposition completely negates and fails to understand that the inherent interconnectedness between the two superpowers everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahim, for very melodiously putting all your views across. I now invite team opposition to put forth their questions to the second speaker side proposition. Yes, please.
Thank you for your speech, ma'am. Ma'am, I would like, so you mentioned in your speech how human interests have led to the conservation of many species, but we know that when it comes to human interests, there has been deforestation, mining, and pollution, leaving many species endangered and dead, which also has been a result of human interests to widen the lands and to build more industries. So how do you justify your statement and your stance?
Thank you, ma'am, for your question. I'd like to answer this by saying that no other species apart from humans has the cognitive sense of understanding, emotion, and the sense of wrong. Since the advent of time, humans have evolved with an intellect. They have understood their wrongdoings, and therefore, reforestation is a term that is now being taught everywhere for this same reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Urvi Banerjee, side opposition, you may now present your question.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your speech. You had mentioned how the well-being of humans is woven into the interest of multi-species and how they are related. But this has been proven wrong every time. For example, during the building of the Three Gorge Dam in China, it was done only due to the interest of humans with absolute neglect for the endangered species in that region. So how do you justify your stance?
Thank you, ma'am, for your question. The simplest answer would be that that's just one instance, and also the very fact that there are multiple cases. For instance, there is this one species called the Golappa turquoise, which were actually saved from their own species, and the species called the feral rats and pigs. This particular species was saved by human efforts. Over a period of 30 years, their own population has increased over 1000%. So this superpowers everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahim. Thank you, Urvi. Judges, I now request the second speaker, side opposition, Priyansha Ray, to come forth and express her views against the motion.
Members of the House, let me paint you a picture. Imagine a world where justice knows no bound, where the rights of all the species are respected and protected. Good afternoon, members of the House, members of the jury, and my most worthy opponent. The House believes that the focus of our development plans should be human interests rather than multi-species justice, and I vehemently argue against the motion. Multi-species justice. As my first speaker mentioned, it is a concept that advocates for the fair and equitable treatment for all the living species, regardless of their status, be it humans, animals, plants, or the most minute species on planet Earth. Human interest is a part of multi-species justice. It is not about saying that humans and plants and animals are exactly the same, but we still need to recognize and respect the different ways of their being. Members of the House, we exist and survive with all the other species. We don't and possibly cannot live alone, and neither are we independent to do so. We have an interdependent relationship with all the species on our planet Earth. Could we survive in a world without plants or animals? The answer is no. But for human interest, how are we treating these other species? We are cutting down the trees, we are destructing the habitat for the animals, and all in all, we are majorly disrupting the ecosystem. Members of the House, let me present a few of the many examples where our development plans focused on human interest rather than multi-species justice. As recent as 23rd August 2023, due to climate change, Eastern Canada suffered a forest fire with more than 5,800 fires in a space of 153 square kilometers, according to the Canadian Forest Fire Research. Allow me to quote Jan Vogler, a scientist from the research of Forest Fire Canada. I quote, she said, the biggest takeaway is this is because of us humans that we have seen so many forest fires this year due to greenhouse gas emissions. Members of the House, greenhouse gas emissions, and how is this affecting us? Climate change, melting glaciers up to 90% in Antarctica, the rising sea levels across the earth, and human health. We can see that by focusing on this so-called human interest, we are further compromising on our own well-being, our own health. Members of the House, the Antarctic ozone hole, an area which is suffering from immense ozone depletion over Antarctica. The ozone layer plays a crucial role in protecting life on Earth by absorbing the harmful ultraviolet radiations. The sun benefits the humans, plants, and animals, and all the living beings. The oxygen in the air is vital and necessary for every living species on Earth. If all these heavenly bodies and substances look into multi-species justice, members of the House, why can't we humans do so? I am not saying that we should sideline our interests. We should together acknowledge the rights and well-being of all the species and work towards the holistic development for ourselves. When one tugs a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you, Priyasha, for that very animated delivery of your arguments. I now invite members of side proposition to address their questions to the speaker.
Ma'am, may I please go ahead?
Yes, please.
Thank you for the recognition, ma'am, and congratulations on your speech, ma'am. Ma'am, since you mentioned about the Canadian forest fires, how about we look at it this way? If there were no humans left because we neglected our own interests, how do you propose that that forest would have been combated? Because no other species would have been able to combat that very fire except for humans.
Thank you for your question, ma'am. As the motion stands, multi-species justice, where all the species, including humans, get the same status in society. How can you imagine a world where there would be no humans? This is neglecting the very motion which says multi-species justice. As I reiterated in my speech, I am not only focusing on humans, but every species. If humans are the ones who are there, they are the only ones who can further help the other species. As you mentioned, they are the only ones who have imagination. They are the ones who can think for a better tomorrow. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Is there any more question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
May I go
Yes,
ahead?
Mahim, please go ahead.
Thank you. Congratulations on your speech, ma'am. My question to you is that in an economic climate like ours, where there is poverty, there is unemployment, and so many other problems, how do you propose to aid multi-species justice, wherein every species gets some sort of an equity?
Thank you for your question, ma'am. You mentioned the topics like employment and poverty. This is something where only humans are affected. This is an economic point which you have put forward, where this is a very social stance we have here. Multi-species justice has nothing to do with employment and poverty, because that is something which only humans have to look into, while the stance is that multi-species justice implies where all the species get equal rights and justice in our world. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Priyasha. Thank you, Mahim. Ladies and gentlemen, the third speaker from side proposition, Japneet Kaur, will now express her views for the motion.
Thank you so much for the recognition, ma'am. A very good afternoon to everyone present here. Taking forward the flow of the debate, I would like to remind everyone that us humans have a very important moral obligation to fulfill. And that moral obligation is to prioritize our own species' well-being and interest so that we can progress further. Ladies and gentlemen, the development plans that form the basis of all the countries primarily focus on human interests and aim to enhance the quality of human life. We aim to reduce poverty, instill education so that we can ensure a better access to essential resources. We need to realize that addressing human needs is very crucial in achieving social stability and facilitating the progress of a country and its citizens. Furthermore, members of the House, prioritizing human interests in development planning is more practical due to its direct impact on human lives. While the idea of multi-species justice might sound very ethical, in reality, it is very difficult and very impractical to possess. Let me give you reasons why I say this. The concept of multi-species justice, as we know of it, has no uniform standards. And different human beings and individuals have different definitions and different views of what constitutes justice for multi-species. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, it is difficult for us humans to define and agree on what is just and right for the other species. And that is why prioritizing the needs of human beings over multi-species justice is more practical approach. Although we do realize the importance of coexistence of all the species that are in nature, we must also realize the fact that if there are regulations which ensure multi-species justice, it will limit or slow down our developmental efforts. Thus, we need to realize the fact that we need to take a step back from multi-species justice to ensure that every human's basic needs at least are met before we extend our considerations to other species that are on this planet. By prioritizing human interests in developmental plans, we are setting the foundation of a more humane, inclusive, and harmonious society, to say the least, that will empower us individuals and human beings to help ourselves first and other human beings around us. Once we have addressed the human inequalities and hardships which exist in this very ecosystem, we can then devote our energy, our time, and our resources more efficiently towards multi-species justice. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, with millions of people living below the poverty line or lacking access to essential resources such as healthcare or education, it is only logical that the topic of multi-species justice takes a backseat to help human interests progress. Thus, it is essential for all of us to realize and ensure that the needs of human beings are met before we address or delve into the needs of other species. Thank you.
Thank you, Japneet, for that very educative and explanatory address that you just gave us. Side opposition, please address your questions to the speaker. Urvi, I request you to present your question first.
Thank you for the recognition, and thank you, ma'am, for your speech. You said that human beings have a priority and to develop their own interests and improve their lives. But don't we also have a responsibility, having higher intellect than the other species to protect the environment and all the creatures inhabiting it?
Thank you so much for the question, ma'am. Ma'am, I think the speech very well highlighted the fact that unless and until we prioritize our interests first so that we can progress, we will not be able to address the needs of other species. So in order to address the needs and development and progress of other species, we first need to reach a stage ourselves where there are no social evils existing in our society. I hope that answered your question, and thank you very much.
The other question, please. Akansha,
Thank you for your speech, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the recognition, Chair. Thank you for your speech, ma'am. In your speech, you spoke so much about how multi-species justice is impractical. But, ma'am, you must also understand without multi-species justice, a majority of human interests will not even be met, including poverty because of a bad environment and lack of coexistence with other species. So how do you justify your stance and your statement?
Thank you so much for the question, ma'am. Again, as mentioned in my speech, at the current stage that we stand in, we do not have the right or the ability to think about what is right and what is wrong and what is just for other species. We are at a stage where we ourselves need to progress first. And only after we develop our interests and we progress, only it is then that we will be able to look after the needs. And only then will the concept of multi-species justice will be practical. I hope that answered your question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Japneet, and thank you, Akansha. I now request Urvi Banerjee from side opposition to come forward and express her views against the motion.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Close your eyes and imagine a world where only humans thrive because human interests were focused upon. It is a barren and desolate world. The skies are grey and polluted, and the rivers are choked with trash, and the forests are gone. Members, this is exactly the kind of picture that side proposition has carefully hidden from us. Good morning, members of the jury. Welcome back to the final round of this debate. Today, I stand here firmly speaking against the motion. According to the Oxford Dictionary, selfishness is a motive lacking consideration for other people, concerned chiefly with one's own personal profit or pleasure. Members, I can't help but think that this resonates perfectly with side proposition's arguments. When we are speaking about development, we are talking about the development of the entire society, members, that includes not only humans, but other species as well. Don't be fooled when side proposition's first speaker came up here and argued that it is an utopian idea. It is a very realistic and achievable goal, and there are many ways to balance human interests with multi-species justice, but have been clearly neglected by humans. The world that we live in is an ecosystem. It has progressed to the point where we are supposed to coexist, members. It was never about one species. Then who is side proposition to come up here and argue that human interest shall prevail superior? Now, side proposition had clearly justified their arguments with reference to human well-being. But members, understand, this is not just the justification of well-being. This is the justification of cruelty. Humans do have a right to develop and improve their lives. They do have a right to reduce poverty and improve healthcare, but they do not have a right to do this at the expense of other species. We have a responsibility to care for all other species and to protect the environment. They mention that development should focus on human interests rather than multi-species justice, according to the motion. And yes, humans have taken measures like use of renewable energy and reforestation. But members, actions speak louder than words. And time again, we have been shown through dam constructions in Kenya or China and oil operations in the Arctic that the reformative measures are in no way proportion with the damage caused by human interests. Now, the second speaker and the third speaker had mentioned that humans have the highest cognitive sense of understanding, which essentially ruined their entire stance. Because if humans really had a high level of understanding and intellect, then why would our ecosystems be in ruins today? As rightfully said by Walt Kelly, we have met the enemy, and it is us, members. But unlike side proposition, we have realized the impending danger of the policy of putting human interest above all. Members, especially in this time when we have already seen the consequences, how can we afford to be selfish in our development, knowing that future generations will suffer simply because we chose to neglect other species? I end my speech by saying, do we really want to live in a world where all species can thrive, or a world desolate and barren? The choice is ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Urvi, for taking us along into this imaginative world with you. The final rebuttal for today. Please begin with your questions. Let's have good quality questions and good quality answers for the final rebuttal, please.
May I go ahead?
Side proposition?
Yes, ma'am. May I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, you mentioned in your speech that actions speak louder than words. And isn't that proven by the very actions of building dams, which provide irrigation, water for irrigation, which prevent droughts, which provide water to animals, and many such facilities? Why have you only looked at the negatives of this?
Thank you, ma'am, for your speech. The reason I have chosen to look at the negative aspect of it simply is because the negative aspect overpowers it. All the dams that have been constructed, most of them, they have paid compensation to the humans for moving them, but they have done nothing to resuscitate the natural habitat or the endangered species living in the region. This is exactly why I've chosen the example to further back my stance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anisha, do you have another question?
Yes, ma'am. May I go ahead, please?
Yes.
All right, excellent speech, ma'am. My question to you is that you stated that many of the human activities are the root cause of issues that are being faced by the animals. Now, there have been conservation efforts put by individuals to save the Galapagos Islands tortoise from invasive species. So, isn't this just highlighting the fact that animals themselves somehow lead to extinction of other animals, and it is not humans that should only be painted in bad light, because they're not the root cause of extinction and loss of animal life and plant life?
Thank you for your question. I had clearly mentioned in my speech that yes, humans have taken reformative measures, but these measures are in no way proportion or compatible with the effect that it has led to the downfall of the species. So that is why I chose to use that example. Thank you.
Thank you to both the participants. Judges, please note that all three participants of each team have delivered their first address. I now call upon Akansha Panda, the principal speaker, side opposition. Please note, side opposition will be summing up first. Akansha Panda, over to you.
Thank you for the recognition, Chair. I will begin in 3, 2, and 1. Good afternoon once again to the August House at large. Today, as we have reached the end of this debate, and before I sum up my team's stance and prove to you why this motion still stands invalid, let me clarify a misconception side proposition holds today in this debate. Members, the motion talks about human interests and not human needs, both of which are not interchangeable terms. Members, human needs by its definition are more fundamental than interests. In addition, while interests are tangible things that can be traded or even compromised, proving the fact that focusing on human interests will actually lead us nowhere. That being said, let me reinstate the burden of proof side opposition holds today. We propagate the fact that multi-species justice includes humans as well, and we are not negating human interests at all. But the moment we focus on one aspect, the entire world will and has ended up in shambles. Secondly, human interests are not possible to achieve unless we have sustainable development, which is also a result of multi-species justice. Let me clarify another side, a conception side proposition holds today. They spoke about conservation and a lot of other things that human interests have led to, but members understand this is just a minority of the things. There are a lot of other things that human interests have led to which are not good and has harmed the environment instead. My second speaker gave the House a various number of examples and elaborated on every aspect the world is facing as a consequence of human interests. Members of the House, human interests might have progressed humanity to some extent, but understand that this is short term and this progress will not be furthered in the future unless we have the resources to do so today, which also is a result of multi-species justice. What we have been trying to advocate throughout this debate is the very fact to seek a balance between humans and other living beings. My third speaker successfully proved to the House by pointing out the logical fallacies that lie inside proposition's arguments today. They have negated various aspects of this debate because we realize the moment they do, the debate has already been won by side opposition. What they do not understand is multi-species justice is a wider approach and seeks the well-being of every living being, including humans that live on Earth. Take, for example, a spider's web. If even one of the parts of the web breaks, the entire structure of the web falls apart. And that is exactly how we as an ecosystem coexist and function together. Members, even the littlest of beings we see today, even bacteria, helps humans in ways we do not know. Members, today we as side opposition agree that human interests are important for humanity to progress, but when multi-species justice seeks a balance between both, we as humans should focus on it more. Members, please understand multi-species justice has one definite definition unless what side proposition has stated throughout this debate. It does not quite literally mean justice of species, but it means the conservation and coexistence of species along with ours. Members, what side proposition has stated today simply proves the fact that we have shown to the House that human interests alone cannot seek for development, and the only end goal all of us can collectively agree on is development and well-being of every individual and living being on this earth. Members, to rest the case of side opposition, members of the House, I ask you today, would we have really progressed so far if we did not have the resources to do so? Members, every little innovation humanity has made circles back to nature, and sustenance of this nature comes from multi-species justice and not human interests. With that, we would like to rest our case, but not our stance. Thank you.
Thank you, Akansha. Judges, with that, team opposition has summed up and completed their arguments. I request Anisha Singh, the principal speaker, side proposition, to come forward and sum up for her team.
Now, to conclude, I would like to remind you how the very term human interests or anthropocentrism has been misconstrued by the side opposition. First, that criticism of anthropocentrism can be counterproductive and misleading by failing to distinguish between legitimate and illegitimate human interests. Second, that humans differ greatly in environmental impacts, and consequently, addressing human inequalities should be a precondition for environmental protection. Third, since ecosystems constitute the life support system for humans, anthropocentrism can and should be a powerful motivation for environmental protection. Now, we must realize that the third speaker of side opposition stated that actions speak louder than words. Well, we as humans have shown actions as well. We have shown actions through reforestation, by making wildlife sanctuaries, by reducing carbon footprints. I believe these actions do speak louder than the words. Now, let me also focus on Darwin's theory. The mechanism that Darwin proposed for evolution is natural selection, because resources are limited in nature. Organisms with heritable traits that favor survival will possess the traits to increase in frequency over generations. Natural selection causes population to become more adapted or increasingly well suited to their environments over time. Now, natural selection depends on the environment and requires existing heritable variation in a group. The study of man done by Darwin himself showed that in spite of his descent, he is indeed unique among all organisms. Human intelligence is unmatched by that of any other creature. Humans are the only animals with a true language, including grammar and syntax. Only humanity, as Darwin emphasized, has developed genuine ethical systems. Now, the second speaker also stated that greenhouse gases are being emitted, but we must realize that protecting giant sequoia trees are also helping us to combat airborne carbon that makes the climate change worse. Now, in a newspaper which was written by the Trends in Ecology and Evolution, researchers with the Long-Term Ecology and Evolution Research Network outlined an agenda for improving our understanding of how species help support the benefits of ecosystem on which we as humans depend. That just gives more support to the stance that human interests are reliant on multi-species. If rare species that are of the most interest of conservation are also benefiting from people's lives, it creates an added incentive to protect them. I think side opposition did not understand our side clearly. I would like to reiterate on the fact that from a practical stance and ask the opposition very simple questions. Now, we're well aware that air travel causes a lot of pollution by emitting petroleum. Now, in the name of multi-species protection, are we genuinely going to put a halt on air travel? The answer is quite inevitably clear. It is no. We're supposed to understand that human interests do and will clash with multi-species justice. But it's important for us to understand that as individuals, we cannot give a clear, concise definition of multi-species. If I like cats, am I supposed to protect them? And if I think that mosquitoes harm me, am I supposed to kill each one I see? Well, this is what side opposition must understand. The term multi-species is very subjective. Each individual will have different definition. Let's take, for example, the alligators in Florida. If they are harming us, if they are a threat to us, are we supposed to let them loose? Because apparently we are their prey and we must keep in mind multi-species interests. Or are we supposed to take the practical path and protect our own species? The answer is quite clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Anisha. Judges, with that, we come to an end of all the speeches for today. I request you to check your scores and complete totaling if required. Participants, thank you very much for putting forth your views in front of us. It has been quite an interesting session, and I would like to take the liberty, while the results are being tabulated, of addressing a few things, though of course the judges are better qualified to address you on the topic which we are debating today. I personally feel that development plans is something which both sides have not really worked upon. Of course, all of you gave excellent speeches, and it was interesting to see how the third speakers categorically introduced rebuttal effectively. The summing up was also, I think, quite effective, but I'll let the judges talk about that. A couple of things when you're in an online debating session. One, make sure the background that you're sitting against is not very distracting. Some of you, if there's a chart behind you that has got something very fascinating, I'm likely to lose out in a couple of your sentences while I'm looking around. So just be a little careful on that front next time onwards. And I'm sure you're all aware that rebuttal has a very important role. What I noticed in the course of this debate was that some questions were just being asked for the sake of asking questions. Let's not let the two questions be, which is fair in a way. But while you're listening, you've all made it to the final round. So you're all quite capable of framing questions which will challenge the intellect of the speaker. Then again, the answers to the questions, don't beat around the bush. You have plenty of time. You've researched, you know your speech. You can tackle it better. So I think that is a portion of your skill set that probably you guys can work better on. Otherwise, all the best to both the teams. As with the India-Pakistan match yesterday, I hope the best team wins. Judges, I would like to invite you to express your views if you have completed the totaling and would like to encourage or educate our participants. Ms. Kapoor, Ms. Sevak, Ms. Dattabera.
Thank you, Dr. Bhasin. First off, I would like to congratulate both the teams. You spoke very, very well. And I think you would all six of you would make excellent lawyers. And I hope you would consider that as professions as you go further in your careers. I think listening to the arguments, I think St. Agnes Loreto Day had a more difficult proposition to defend. Particularly given the world that we live in and the world that we're heading towards. So I really want to congratulate you because you had a difficult proposition to defend.